Alright, so this motion path option, I'm actually going to hide this background. So you can hide any layer, and sometimes it helps to hide layers too. Just clicking this dot underneath the eyeball icon. And sometimes that helps kind of clean up your space so you can focus on some other parts of an animation and that type of thing. I'm actually going to delete all of these frames here. So I'll just do clear keyframe, clear frames, and remove frames. Okay, so now I'm gonna remove the tween. One thing I forgot to mention that you can add and remove tween. So once you tween it, you can go back. You can undo it as well. So that's something to keep in mind. So I'm just going to move my flower object here. I'll move my properties palette out of the way, just kind of in this corner. And I'm just going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to open my properties, make sure that that is a movie clip. It's called flower spin. Perfect. And from frame 1 to frame, let's say 60, I'm going to have this guy move. So it's going to be insert keyframe on frame 60, making a duplicate of that flower piece, kind of going to another side so it's coming off the stage to the stage, getting a little larger. And then I'm going to control click and create the classic tween. So this is what we saw earlier, just the very basic from one point to the other. Okay, so what you can do is actually click on this flower layer here. So just where the words are, you can see now the whole layer is highlighted. And if I control click that, once it's highlighted, I can actually add classic motion guide. And so what this is going to do is, I'll pull it up here. So this is going to add a layer called this guide layer, and it has the same name of the layer that it has a guide for. And so really what this is going to do is allow me to draw a line to have this object sort of trace or follow that path. So that's why they're calling it a guide, a motion guide. So here's the layer that's going to be guided. Here's the layer of the guide that I created. Just by shift clicking and going add motion guide. So again, see this area that has the empty artwork space is just kind of this blank circle, right, in the timeline. That is where I'm going to click and start drawing my motion guide, because that artwork is going to span across the entirety of the layer that of this flower layer. So I'll grab the pen tool, and I'm just going to start kind of drawing this guide of how I want this thing to move. And you can just do whatever kind of you want with it. So it defaults this black line. And now as you can see, as I'm kind of scrubbing the timeline here back and forth, my object is not really connected to this path. So I'm going to actually click on frame 1 here of my flower layer. And this is sort of a tricky part. So what you have to do is actually see that your flower is here, and you have to click on the flower itself. And whatever area you kind of clicked on, there's this like teeny tiny black dot on there that you can actually can't even, you'll be able to see in the video, but there's a little dot on here. You just kind of snap it to this line. And then so you go to the end here, and again, you're kind of, this is a little larger, and I'll click this open area. So if I click here, you can see that there's like this black dot on the tip of my cursor right there. And so wherever I clicked on that object, that's the anchor point that I want to connect to the end of this clipping motion path line. So I'll drag it over here and just kind of clip it there. Now if I scrub it again, didn't quite work, so I'm going to try it again. Snap it again. Go back. Let me get closer to the center. There we go. It's a little fussy. So it's just one of those things where you have to kind of keep trying it until it actually works. And then once you scrub it, it'll kind of follow. So really that's it. It's following the path now. Of course, this line is showing, and we don't want it to show. You can actually just turn off that guide layer by hitting this little eyeball icon again. Just click it right underneath there, and then that will go. Now, if I wanted to kind of show it like so, if I wanted to then make this object then change its path, I could unhide this guide layer, and then I can get my sub-selection tool, which is basically like the direct selection tool. And remember, you can now click on these paths and then kind of adjust them. I can do whatever. Now the thing is that if you move these endpoints, then it's probably going to break the path of the object. So right. So if I move this here, this path is gonna it's going to be a little bit different. So I'll have to then reconnect this object again to this path. So I'll make it a little bit easier on myself. There we go. So as I move that clipping path again, it's going to disconnect, and then I'll just have to go ahead and reattach it to the ends here that I want it to. And it sort of snaps, which is nice to that point. Yeah, so now we're connected. So it's doing something a little different. So if you wanted to tweak it, you could that way. Let's say I wanted to sort of do the same thing for both of these layers. So I can go to my layers palette, and I don't want to kind of rebuild this animation over and over again. I could then just add 2 new layers up above this guide layer, and then I can actually just click and then hold shift and then click again all of the frames that I want to then duplicate for the next layer, the new layers that I'm creating. So I'll hold Alt, click, and drag those up, and now I have 2 layers of this, 2 versions of this, these 2 layers. So I can then move these guys. Looks like it broke, so let me try it again. Let's see if they act good. I'll actually move them down a little bit further so it kind of overlaps a bit. I'll add frames here on the end for the bottom so the artwork just doesn't kind of disappear. I want to make sure that my timeline is full of stuff. So I'll just control click and insert frame. Alright, so then I have kind of 2 very similar things going on. Let me just go back to this frame. I'll hide these so they're not really confusing us. And see, yep, I'm connected there. I'm just not. Where's this object? Here we go. I'm going to have to actually move this on one end. So when I copied the layers over, it kind of broke the clipping path. So then I just have to like kind of reconnect them. So now it's a much faster way of doing these twice. So you can kind of layer this if you wanted to, and that type of thing. So if you notice, after duplicating those, I'm in the beginning, I have one going and the other one just kind of pops out from nowhere. So what I want to do is actually extend this to have both of these going at the same time. Okay, so what I want to do is actually then select this guide flower layer, hold shift and click this end part here to kind of highlight this whole thing. And if I take my my cursor and hover over this edge, I can pull this back and actually go to this end piece and extend this animation here. So you'll see that it creates these double arrows, and you can actually extend the animation or compress it if you just click that end part and hold for a couple seconds and then extend maybe there. Now so I have all of these kind of flowers going simultaneously together, sort of around this thing. Again, when I did that though, this end part kind of overlapped, so my video was getting a little too long for the bottom layers. And you could just kind of cut this end, this last part here. Remove frames. There. So just to make your video shorter so it doesn't like stop at the end and things start disappearing and falling off. So that's how you can do that. Now I can actually, if I wanted to, I could adjust this guide, layer here to make this kind of move in any other sort of which way if I wanted to. So I can have more of a dynamic thing going on. Of course, you could click those tweens and go into your properties palette and adjust the easing, ease in or ease out to give it more of a little bit of a more quality to it, and that type of thing. So a little more dynamic touch to it. You can also do all of the other animation options that you want as well. What you can also do is if I click on this object, now say my timeline is starting to fill up a lot with animations, right? But if I know that I want this object to do something within its own timeline and never stop, or stop for that matter, but if I wanted just to have an action inside of itself, you can actually double click this object and well, actually let me jump back and just go through. I'm going to export this really quick. Export the movie on my desktop, and I'll call this flowers, and save as a SWF file. And so I'll open this up and so we can look at it. So remember, my background actually is there. It's just hidden from the desktop. Remember, I kind of turned it off to kind of clear things up. It's showing in the SWF file, even though in my working document it was turned off and hidden. So that's good. Now you can see that the SWF file, it's continuously rotating again. These things are never really stopping. It's just going to the end of the video and then coming back to the beginning. The same concept. The concept is identically the same when you jump into a symbol itself. So notice the timeline here. I'm going to save it. If I double-click this movie clip symbol, the timeline clears out because I'm actually, and here's my breadcrumb trail, I'm inside of the flower symbol that's inside of scene 1. So now I'm inside of this object's timeline. So I can jump out, and then now I'm back to scene 1 where all these guys were kind of jumping around the page. But again, double-clicking inside of this symbol will take me into its own personal timeline, which is frame 1. So this object is static inside of the inside of its own animation here. If I wanted this object to have some kind of motion in and of itself, I could apply that here. So what I want to do is have this flower actually rotating while it's moving along that path. So instead of actually making it rotate on scene 1, I can actually just make it rotate on within its own timeline, and then it can then continue on with this animation to follow the path while it's rotating. This kind of will help clear up a lot of what's going on in this timeline, because just this alone, we have all of this going on here in the timeline, so it gets really messy. So double-clicking inside of this object, I will start with, first and foremost, converting it to a movie clip symbol. Because I'm actually inside of a movie clip symbol, and I have to convert this artwork into another movie clip symbol to then start animating in the timeline. So this gets a little confusing. So once I jump into that timeline here, if I open the properties palette, it's in a bitmap symbol again. So if I then control-click and convert it to another symbol, and then hit OK, now it's a movie clip symbol and I'm good to go. All right, so there's that. I'm going to, let's say I'll give it an instance name. Actually, no, I won't need to. I'll leave it as that. And then I'm going to go to the timeline then, and I'm going to start giving it its own animation. So I'll call this spin. And it's going to start at this point, and then by frame 10, I'm going to control click and insert a keyframe, and I'm going to rotate this thing. So I'll click the object, modify, transform, and then here I'm going to do a scale and rotate option. And so I'm going to make this rotate, and I'm just going to do 90 degrees. And hit OK. So this rotated the object 90. Then I'm going to hit another keyframe down here, insert keyframe on frame 20. Click my object and go transform, scale and rotate. And then it's going to be 180 this step. OK. And then I'll go to 30. Insert another keyframe, click it, modify, transform, scale and rotate, 270, yeah, no, yes, 270, so 270, I'll hit OK, and then 40, insert another keyframe, and then click my object, and transform, rotate, scale and rotate, and then I'll do 360. Oops, that didn't work. I did the wrong way here. Transform. Oh, you know what? Let me see how that worked. No, you know what? I need to start at the beginning. So actually, I'll delete that and then go to frame 1 and just copy it and paste it in place. Edit, paste in place. Yeah, because that starts at the beginning. So, so essentially, this should just rotate. It'll just start spinning. So I'm going to then right-click in between each of these keyframes and then go Classic Tween, right-click, create Classic Tween, right-click, create Classic Tween, over and over and over again. All right. So then, as this plays out, it's kind of spinning in not exactly the way I wanted it to, but you kind of get the idea. And so I'll jump out of it to scene 1, and I'll hit save. And as I play this thing out, okay, this isn't spinning at all. Like, this object is not spinning. But inside of it, I can see that it has this animation going on, okay? So when I jump out, this is one of those weird things where I'm going to have to actually export the movie as an SWF file, save. And let me see if I can find it. Well, maybe that didn't happen. Class sample. Well, let me try deleting these. Let's see. That's showing. Okay, let me try that again. Export movie. I'll just call it flower spinning. Okay. Okay, so now this is showing. So since these were both the same object in the library, now they're both spinning. So I actually affected the timeline inside of each object. So if I wanted one to spin differently, let's just say, then I would actually go into my library and drag another one out. And then so I would have this object converting to a movie clip symbol. Jump into its timeline, and then I would be able to do whatever I wanted to. So just keep in mind that that since I duplicated this flower layer earlier on, and I duplicated that animation, it took the same instance of that flower, and when I edited this flower object's timeline, that also edited simultaneously its copy. And so when you edit a movie clip symbol, you're actually editing a movie clip of that symbol. Okay, so just keep that in mind, and it actually cleans up my timeline entirely, and I get all of this stuff going on. So any questions on that? So again, you're just going to see it on the SWF file. You're not going to see it here. They're just kind of staying still because those are movie clips. The only way I can see what's happening on this one is when I go into it, double click inside of it. All right. That is the